Welcome back. Well, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, many commodity prices have gone up, including oil prices. Fuel prices have gone up in many countries around the world, but Indonesia has yet to be affected as fuel prices are heavily subsidized in Indonesia. But will Indonesia's fuel prices be increased eventually? Let's take a deeper look at the issue. So first of all, we're going to look at Brent crude oil prices. As I mentioned, the global price of crude oil has been soaring since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So let's wait for the data here behind me. Now what you're seeing here is the price of Brent crude oil, the highest points it reached each day since February the 24th, which is when Russia began their invasion of Ukraine. As you can see, Brent crude price shot up above $100 on the day of the invasion. I can see on the 24th of February, it shot up to 105, the highest point that day. And this is the highest price since 2014. It hasn't been $100 since 2014. Now, crude oil prices continue to go up as the invasion went on. As you can see here, the Brent crude oil price managed to hit $139 a barrel on the 7th of March, the first time it had done so since 2008, or the highest in 14 years. Now, since then, Brent crude oil has been dropping to $110 and below. Today, it was at around $101 per barrel, but even so, that is still high. The last time it was above $100 was back in 2014. Right, so this surge in crude oil prices has caused fuel or gasoline prices to increase in many parts of the world. Now, in the United States, the average price of gasoline is now at $4.32 a gallon, which is still the highest in 14 years. Over in the UK, fuel prices have also surged, reaching a new record high of £1.63 per liter. In Singapore, prices of fuel or prices of petrol have also increased. They increased to 3 Singapore dollars and 9 cents per liter, a 16% increase since the start of the year. Right, as you can see, Singapore up by 16% since the start of the year. In the US, up to $4.32 a gallon, 51% compared to last year. And in the UK, £1.63 per liter, a new record high in the UK. All right, moving on, let's take a look in Indonesia, where some non-subsidized fuel prices have increased as well, but not to record highs. As we know, the Indonesian government spends a lot to subsidize fuel. The most used fuel type, Pertalite, is subsidized. That price has not been increased yet. Now, in 2021, the Indonesian government spent 83.7 trillion rupiah to subsidize fuel and LPG prices. This is a 37% increase compared to the previous year. It was also higher than their projected target for subsidizing fuel and LPG, about 27 trillion more than intended. Now, in 2022, the government aims to spend 77 trillion rupiah on subsidizing fuel and LPG, higher than last year's target. Right, so every year, the Indonesian government decides on an assumption of oil crude price, as the difference between the assumption and the Indonesian crude price is subsidized. That difference continues to go up as Indonesian crude prices is continuing to go up. It was at $95.72 per barrel in February. In January, it was $85. Last year in February, it was only $60. So the Indonesian crude price assumption is $63 per barrel. The crude price, Indonesian crude price, is $95 per barrel. So the question is, will Indonesia have to increase the price of subsidized fuel as global oil prices continues to soar above $100 per barrel? Well, to discuss this and more, we are being joined by Fabby Tumiwa, who is the Executive Director of the Institute for Essential Service Reform. Okay, just wait a minute here. Hi, Fabby, can you hear me? Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, Pak Fabby, thank you so much for joining us on Jakarta Movers and Shakers. Now, first of all, I want to talk about crude oil prices. As we know, it soared after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It touched $139 a barrel, but now global oil prices are going down, even though Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues. Can you explain to our viewers why our global oil prices are on a downward trend in recent days, Pak?
Well, global oil market is very dynamic and influenced by sentiment of market players, also affected by geopolitical situation. So it's not just demand and supply fundamentals. So we can see that the oil price can rapidly increase and then decline, as we have seen in the last few days. And the declining oil price that we currently witness is actually affected again by this sentiment, as the market see that the worst case scenario or that they anticipate about the impact of Russia oil embargo has less impact actually to the supply. We know that last week that US announced to ban oil import from Russia, right? And actually, if we look at the whole crude oil price, actually it reached a 7-year record high in February. It's driven by the global supply, also concern emanating from Russia-Ukraine tension at the time, and then the threats to the infrastructure in the United Arab Emirates. And OPEC Plus, we see that it's struggling to hit its targeted monthly output increase. So we see that oil price settled around, I think, around 4% on Tuesday last week, as the United States banned Russian oil import, and Britain said that it will phase them out by the year end. Well, this decision expected to further disrupt the global energy market, where we know Russia is the second largest exporter of crude. And if we look at this, also that the trend of oil price that have surged more than 30% since Russia invaded Ukraine, and United States and the other countries imposed a rough sanction, and Russian oil and gas export were already shunned before the ban as a trade result to avoid running a fall of the future sanction. So that's explained why oil price is up and down in the last few weeks.
All right, but now, as you were mentioning, Russia is one of the world's largest exporters of oil, and sanctions reportedly had impacted their ability to export oil. But now it seems that global oil supplies are safe, it's adequate. So do you see global oil prices continuing to go down, and do you think global oil supplies will be adequate despite these sanctions on Russia?
Well, Russia produced around 11.5 million to 11.5 million barrel oil per day, and export around 7 to 8 million barrel oil per day. So I'm not really sure if this, if this will continue to go down. The price will continue to go down. The market is very dynamic. International Energy Agency predicted that this year oil will rise to 100.6 million barrel per day as restriction to COVID ease. This is still well below the pre-pandemic consumption demand. And we know if we look at this price, then supply, if we look at the supply and demand, then that's actually the demand will surely increase. And the supply is still affected by some factors. So the question whether supply can meet this demand, right? And supply is affected by some factors. Well, of course, it is affected by Russia supply, and we don't really know what is the impact to Russia oil supply. And it's not only the production, but whether Russia can supply the market. Second, whether OPEC Plus could deliver supply as target, knowing that OPEC in several times failed to meet their own target of productions. And the third factor, which I think is very, very important, also that the Iran nuclear deal that can easy the sanction. If it's easy, if the deal reach, then it can easy the sanction, including the oil supply of Iran. That if the sanction lifted, then it could supply additional around 1.3 million barrel per day. So, well, this still play, but if you look at the number, it's not easy to again replace Russia export of oil if Russia failed to produce and supply oil to the market. The 7 million is not easy to replace.
Okay, it's not easy to replace, but of course, the U.S. has been encouraging more countries to increase its output, trying to find alternative sources of oil. As you were saying, still many uncertainties, but in your expert opinion, are you confident that we will be able to find alternative sources of oil to compensate for Russia's exports of oil, or are you still uncertain that supplies will not be adequate?
Well, as I mentioned, that Russia export around 7 to 8 million barrel per day. If you look at the spare capacity of OPEC, it's actually not enough to replace that supply from Russia, right? It's so if OPEC increase their production, it can add around 4.5, maximum 5 million barrel per day to the market. And non-OPEC member, including US, they could add 2 million barrel per day. US is very, very interesting because the US top production pre-pandemic around 13 million barrel per day. Right now, I think US produce around 11.5, 11.6 million barrel per day. So if US can increase the oil production, it's actually, and plus OPEC, plus non-OPEC member, so it actually can match Russia supply if all Russia export out of the market. But we also see that with Venezuela, one of the largest oil reserve in the world, as US also sanctioned Venezuela, but in the last few weeks we have seen that there is intention to lift that sanction, so US can import oil from Venezuela, and US oil company can go to Venezuela and start pump the oil. But still, it is very uncertain, right? So I can say that, with this, there's a lot of factors in play. So I'm not really sure. I'm not really confident that it can, that the current productions level can really replace that Russia oil if all Russia oil gone from the market.
Okay, Pak Fabby, Russia's exports accounts for a lot of global oil supplies, as you're saying. There are many alternatives. As we were talking about earlier, crude oil prices are increasing. They're dropping slightly to $100 per barrel, but that's still high. Indonesia's crude price is about $95 per barrel. So the question is, should Indonesia increase its subsidized fuel prices? Because despite all this, subsidized fuel prices have not increased yet in Indonesia, Pak.
If you look at the whole price and subsidy of oil in Indonesia is actually based on ICP, Indonesia crude price, right, set in our annual budget, right? And the ICP for this year budget is $63 per barrel. So we have to understand that every $1 increase of oil price of ICP will cause the increase of LPG subsidy around 1.47 trillion and around 49 billion rupiah of kerosene subsidy. So 47 trillion of LPG, 49 billion rupiah of kerosene subsidy, and 2.65 trillion of a fuel compensation. Right. So, and if you look at the ICP in this March set by the government is actually 119 per barrel, if I'm not mistaken. So, if you look at the, let's say that because the price is up and down, and if based on my calculation, if let's say the average price of ICP this year reached like 90 $90 per barrel. So it will make the fuel compensation, the fuel compensation around 71 trillion, and additional 40 trillion for LPG's subsidy, additional subsidy. So overall, just for this, if again, if average $90 per barrel, so we will see additional subsidy and compensation that should be borne by the government is around 110 to 120 trillion rupiah on top of that this year this year subsidy allocation in our annual budget.
So that's almost nearing 200 trillion for subsidizing fuel and LPG pa. So I guess the answer seems to be very simple. We need to increase the price of subsidized fuel, or some of its mechanism must be changed. What is your opinion on that, Pa? Does it need to be increased very soon?
Yeah, I think yes. I think that's the reality, that the current price, that the low price that have to borne by Pertamina shouldn't be maintained, right? I mean, otherwise someone has to pay this cost, right? And I think if the government doesn't allow, or if doesn't allow Pertamina to increase the fuel price, or Pertamina is not willing to increase the price of the fuel that's not subsidized, actually they the one that will bear the cost of this. And we can see later on that the profit of Pertamina could be nose dive, I think, and I think it's not really good for the company. Just to give you an example, that current Pertamax price is around 9,000 to 9,200 per liter, right? And Pertamax is also one of the one of the highest volume of fuel. Pertalite that now dominate around 65%, of total fuel selling of Pertamina, is now at the price of 7,650 rupiah per liter. So let's say if we use that $90 per barrel, so the average fuel price is actually, and this is the economics, is around 8,200 to 8,500 rupiah per liter. So we can see that the gap between the cost of productions and the price of Pertalite, is that the gap is now getting bigger. If we see if the average price as a March ICP is 119, yeah. So it's become 10,600 rupiah per liter. So you see that the price gap is actually quite higher. It's around 3,000 rupiah per liter for Pertalite, right? If again, I think given the volume of Pertalite this year is expected to reach 23 million kiloliters. So we can see that the cost that has to be borne by Pertamina is quite very expensive, I think.
Right. So
very high.
Pertamina will also have to bear some of the costs, but this is what the Indonesian public wants to know. Will they see increased subsidized fuel prices in the near future? Because as you said, Pertamina possibly will not be able to bear the cost. Someone has to bear the cost. Will fuel prices be increased, especially for subsidized fuel? Should it be increased in the near future?
Well, rationally, it should increase, right? I don't know why it has not increased yet. If you look at the Pertamax and Pertalite, it's actually categorized as non-subsidized fuel. So the decision to increase the fuel price is actually under Pertamina, right? But I don't know why Pertamina hasn't increased the price of those products. Maybe reason because of the afraid of the impact to the economy, as we have seen that Indonesia still under recovery after COVID. The impact of COVID to the economy has not yet really gone. And I think increased fuel price could lead to the higher inflation. And I think that's not really good when the inflation increase. At the same time, we are dealing with, we see that other commodity price also increase, that will push price for other commodities also very also increase, right? So I think I understand that there is a kind of a more macro picture on this decision. It's not just simply about costs and the economic, but I think rationally, it has to be adjusted, the price. At least closing the gap. Right now, I think my estimation is right. The gap of the cost of productions and the selling price of the oil is actually is wider, and I think it's not really good.
Okay, but so as you said, rationally, fuel prices should be increased. There are concerns about inflation, but as you said, it must be increased, otherwise someone has to bear this large cost. Fabby Tumiwa, Executive Director of the Institute for Essential Service Reform, thank you so much for joining us today on Jakarta Movers and Shakers. Thank you for your insights.